Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, if I told you that being cheap is actually a good thing, if I told you to cut out everything you enjoy, only buy essentials, and lower your expenses to the bare minimum because it's good for you, you'd probably think that in this video I had gone too far. You probably think to yourself, este chico, el Agustín, está loco. Es hombre sin vida. Él no tiene nada. Pobrecito el Agustinito. That's probably what you would say, but hear me out. Being cheap is important. Actually, for many people watching this, being cheap is the only way you'll get in a better situation. For many people out there running the hamster wheel of living paycheck to paycheck, the only way that you're going to get in a better financial situation is cutting your expenses so low that you reach this point of deprivation. And that shouldn't be seen as a bad thing, but it should be seen as an empowering tool. And in this video, I want to talk about 10 reasons why being cheap is important and how being cheap can drastically improve your life. And the first reason is it's the only way you'll get in a better situation. So normally in my videos, I talk about the importance of living with balance, of not overspending and being a mindless consumer, and not underspending and being cheap, but living in the middle, being frugal. However, some people are in such a tough financial spot because they've been living in this extreme for so long that they're strapped with debt. They're in such a bad financial situation that the only way to get in a better situation is to live in the other extreme. And so being cheap is important because for people who are in a desperate situation, in reality, it is the only way that you're going to get in a better situation. If you deprive yourself, then you can focus more on getting in a better situation, which leads me to my second reason. It allows you to fully attack getting in a better situation. When you decide to be cheap and lower your expenses at this level of deprivation, what happens is that you open up a lot of money to fully attack getting in a better situation. For example, if you had $10,000 in debt and decided to be cheap, you could cut out $150 of eating out and drinks, $50 of unnecessary groceries, $200 on activities, $30 on subscriptions, $50 on clothes, $25 on gas, and $100 on Amazon. And although you're being cheap, you're opening up a lot more money to fully attack your debt and getting in a better situation. And so being cheap is important because it allows you to fully attack getting in a better financial situation. It opens up a lot more money so that you can pay off your debt. Instead of living how you normally live and pay the bare minimum, you open up the maximum amount of money to pay off your debt. It moves a lot quicker, which brings me to the third reason. It makes progress a lot quicker. Now, when you decide to be cheap and fully attack getting in a better financial situation, it speeds up your progress. For example, if you have a maxed out credit card of $10,000 and just paid the minimum monthly payment of $300, it would take you 50 months to pay off the credit card. However, if instead you said, I'm going to be cheap and fully attack this debt and pay $600 a month, it would only take you 20 months to pay off your card. Which is huge. You'd make a lot more progress a lot quicker, over 2 years quicker. That is life-changing. And so being cheap is important because it speeds up your progress. When you say, I'm going to be cheap and fully attack getting in a better financial situation, you're able to accomplish a lot more, a lot quicker. However, it's important to understand that this decision is only temporary, which brings me to the fourth reason. It's just a temporary tool. Now, it's important to understand that if you decide to be cheap and fully attack getting in a better situation, that being cheap is just a temporary tool. It's a tool that allows you to do something else. Like how a hammer is a tool to build a table. Once you finish the table, you don't need the hammer anymore and you can enjoy the table because it's built and stable. And just like a hammer, being cheap is a tool that allows you to focus on getting in a better financial situation. And once you're in a better situation, then you don't need to be cheap anymore because your life's more stable. And so being cheap is important because it's a temporary tool that allows you to get in a better financial situation. And although you might be depriving yourself in the moment, it's important to understand that what you're doing is just temporary. Now, the fifth reason is it's a fair trade. Now, if you focus on being cheap and going without the things you enjoy, you'll probably see it as a sacrifice, as giving up things you enjoy. However, what I have come to learn is that a sacrifice is just a worthwhile trade. You're giving up one thing in order to get another, and you're doing it because you think it's worth it. If you're being cheap, you're giving up enjoyment in the present in hopes that your future will be better. And in my opinion, that trade is worth it because instead of living a mediocre 10 years where you're always behind, you were living in deprivation for 2 years to pay off your debt. In the following 8 years, you are debt-free with more enjoyment. And so being cheap is important because it's a fair trade. Sure, you'll be living in deprivation, but in my opinion, 2 years of deprivation and 8 years of not worrying about debt is better than 10 mediocre years of just making it. Now, the sixth reason is it forces you to take responsibility over your own actions. The hardest thing that people have accepting about being in a bad financial situation is accepting that they played a role in getting in that bad situation. Because everybody likes to point fingers and say that the reason that they're in a bad situation is because of circumstance, bad luck, in the government. And sure, those things might have played a role. However, focusing all your energy on them gets you nowhere in life. And most people never get ahead because they're always pointing fingers and they never accepted the role they played in getting in a better situation. And being cheap is all about accepting that you played a role in getting in a bad financial situation and taking action or responsibility to get in a better situation. And so being cheap is important because it forces you to take responsibility over your actions. Instead of living your life as a victim, you're making drastic decisions to get in a better situation. And the seventh reason is that it forces you to learn how to be more resourceful with money. When I was 16 years old, I had a goal to travel the world once I graduated high school. And in order to do it, I needed to save $3,000 in 2 years. Which is a lot of money for a 16-year-old that has never made any money before. But in 2011, I got a summer job at a water park making $7.25 an hour. In that summer, I decided I was going to work as hard as I could and be as cheap as I possibly could in order to save the maximum amount of money possible. In that summer, I worked 6 days a week from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. And I saved money by not doing anything fun, bringing my meals to work, and depriving myself. That summer, I was so cheap, but in that summer, I learned how to be resourceful with my money and save as much as I possibly could. And by the end of the season, 3 months later, I had saved $3,000. I personally have never been in a bad financial situation before, and I think a huge reason is because of what I learned in the summer of 2011 of how to be resourceful with money, and that the easiest way to save money to reach a goal is by not spending it. In 1 month after graduating high school, I backpacked Europe for 3 months. And so being cheap is important because it teaches you how to be resourceful with your money, how to save the maximum amount with the money that you have. Now, the eighth reason is it forces you to see the difference between a want and a need. Another thing that you learn from lowering your expenses to this level of deprivation is the difference between a want and a need. Because when you're trying to save every penny that you possibly can, you learn how few things you need in life: food, water, shelter, and a few other things, but that's basically it. And when you decide to be cheap, you quickly discover that all these things you thought you needed in life were actually just wants. And so being cheap is important because it forces you to understand the difference between a want and a need. When you're living in a scarcity mindset, you fully start to see what are the things that you actually need in life. And once you can see how little you actually need, you'll never confuse a want for a need again and always be making much better financial decisions. Now, the ninth reason is you see the beauty of not being cheap. Once you're in this state of deprivation for so long of being cheap and going without the things you enjoy, you begin to see the beauty of not being cheap. You begin to see how amazing it is to have someone else cook a meal for you at a restaurant, how amazing it is to live comfortably, and how amazing it is to treat yourself to once. It's hard to see the beauty of these things until you go without them for so long, and so many people take all these amazing things we have for granted because they've never experienced life without them. And so being cheap is important because when you deprive yourself and go without these things you enjoy, once you have them again, you have this deep appreciation over the small things. And I think that makes a much richer life. Now, the final reason being cheap is important is you gain the confidence that anything is possible. So as I said, when I was 16 years old, I worked extremely hard so that after I graduated high school, I could travel the world. And that trip, as well as saving up the money for that trip, completely changed my life. Because it taught me that the best things in life come from sacrifice and perseverance. After that summer of 2011, of being extremely cheap, eventually reaching my goal, it was like this domino effect in my life that gave me the confidence to understand that if you set your mind to something, anything is possible no matter how crazy your dream may be. And if you decide to be cheap for a period of time, I can almost guarantee you that you will get in a better financial situation. And more importantly, I can guarantee you that you will see that you are capable of accomplishing anything you set your mind to, that you are more powerful than you give yourself credit. And it will give you the confidence to see that if you set your mind to something, anything is possible. My motivational speech, being cheap isn't always a bad thing. Being cheap can actually drastically change your life. And with that, muchas gracias. Que tenga un buen día. Nos vemos, chicos.